Ervin Perik Beis Mishnah Aleph Oisin Pasin Laberois Abod Yom Dinir Kishmena Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. The Mishnah discusses halach of a well that's located in Círoבין, a standard well which is at least 4 tvachim wide, 4 tvachim long, and 10 tvachim deep. Obviously, is Rishus HaYachid. Therefore, min haTorah, it's also to draw water from a standard well that's in Círoבין and put the water down next to the well, because you're bringing it from Círoבין to Rishus HaYachid. This Isser posed a difficulty to the people traveling to the Beis HaMikdash for Aliyah Regel, for Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot, because it meant that they would not be able to draw water for the animals on Shabbos from the wells along the route. To solve this problem, the Chacham allowed the travelers, the Oilam, to use a unique arrangement of minimal makeshift mechitzas to convert the area around the well into a Rishus HaYachid, so that they may take water from the well on Shabbos. The Mishnah describes these mechitzas and how they must be set up. Obviously, there needs to be very strict halacha, because we're dealing with a real serious deraisa of carrying on Shabbos. Oisun pasin laberois. You may use the following boards to serve as partitions around the well. Pasin are the boards, berois is for the bar. Arbod yom dinir kishmeina. 4 double posts that look like 8 boards. That is, you have 4 double posts that consist of 2 boards perpendicular to each other, L-shaped, like the corner of a square, so having the appearance of 8 boards. Each one of these 4 double posts must be placed at 3 corners of an imaginary square or rectangle drawn around the well. The double posts are viewed as the beginnings of the mechitas that extend along the entire side of the square, converting it into a Rishus HaYachid. Since the well itself is also a Rishus HaYachid, it is now mutter to draw water from the well and put it down in this square that we made. These mechitas ought to be disqualified from the halacha that if a wall is more open than closed, if you have parts merubah la'omed, then you have a big problem over here. However, min haTorah, this psul does not apply in our case, since there are solid amma-wide boards at each corner of the square, as we'll explain later. The square is considered to be fully enclosed, despite the fact that the gaps are wider than the boards. Hence, min haTorah, it's a Rishus HaYachid. Rabbanan, however, ruled that it may not be used as a Rishus HaYachid except by the people being Oil Regel. Even in the case of the people being Oil Regel, the Chachamim allowed them to use these mechitzas to draw water only for the animals, not for the people. If it's possible for a person to climb in and out of the well and drink the water there, he must do so. He has to drink the water in the well and then climb out. Only if this is impossible may water be drawn from the well for the person to drink. As I state in the Gemara, so it's a shvara, you hope it doesn't come to shvara of a situation where the person can be b'sakana by falling into the well. Diyumdin, by the way, the word diyumdin is diyu, which means 2 umdin, 2 amudim, meaning L-shape. Rabbi Yehuda says, Rameir says, Shmeininim kishnein mas abod yumdin b'abab pshutin. We require 8 boards that look like 12. You have 4 double posts and 4 straight ones. As explained above, each double post looks like 2 boards. So the 4 double posts appear as 8 boards, meaning you have 4 L shapes on the corner. Rameir also requires 4 straight boards, making a total of 12, meaning on each side of the square you have to put one in also. The double posts are placed at the corners, and the straight boards are placed along the sides of the square between the double posts. Although it's only Rameir who mentions straight boards, Rabbi Yehuda also requires straight boards if the gaps between the double posts are too wide. The machlekes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rameir applies only where the gaps are between 10 and 13 amas. If the gaps are narrower than 10 amas, all agree that there's no need for the straight boards, and if they're wider than 13 amas, all agree that straight boards are needed. Each Tana's opinion will be explained in the Mishnah below. Gavan asar tvachim, the height of these boards must be at least 10 tvachim, which is the minimum height of any mechitza. V'rochban shisha, and the width has to be at least 6 tvachim. 6 tvachim equals an amma. Sometimes a board that's only 4 tvachim wide, or even less, can suffice as a wall. In this case, however, where each side of the square is more open than closed, each board must be 6 tvachim wide, v'avyan kol shehu, and the thickness could be any amount. And it could be an inch, a half an inch. U'beineam kamlosh de ravaka shal shalosh bakar. Between them, there may be a gap the size of 2 teams of 3 oxen each. A team refers here to a group of animals tied together to pull a plow. A single team of 3 oxen is 5 amas wide, each ox having a width of 1 2/3 of an amma, and such teams are 10 amas wide. So 10 amas is the maximum gap allowed between the double posts. If the gap is any wider, 1 or more straight boards must be placed between the double posts, and no gap will be greater than 10 amas to Reb Meir. Rabbi Yehuda Omer shel arba arba. The gap between them may be as wide as 2 teams of 4 oxen each. The single team of 4 oxen is 6 2/3 amas, meaning 4 1 2/3 amas, and two such teams are 13 and 1/3 amas wide. According to Yehuda, then, a gap of 13 and a little bit of amas is permitted between the double posts. Only if the gap is wider than 13 amas must straight posts be erected to make the gap smaller. So, as we mentioned earlier, Meir and Yehuda agree that straight boards can be necessary. The machlekes is only as to when they are necessary. Meir holds that a straight board is required even to reduce a pirza that's slightly more than 10 amas wide, while Yehuda rules that a straight board is required only to narrow the pirza, which is wider than 13 and a little bit amas wide. Kshurais v'loy mutarais. The width of each team of oxen is measured when the oxen are tied, so there's less space between them, and not when they are loose. Achas nechneses v'achas yotzes. The combined width of both teams together is measured when one team is entering and one is exiting, which requires slightly more space than two teams moving in the same direction. A measurement giving an amas can refer to either the exact amas atsevois, or long amas soichekos. Atsev means sad and soichekos means laughing, because when a person is sad, he's constricted, and when a person is happy, a person is laughing, he expands. The same as we have tefach soichek is the same thing. The Mishnah teaches here that the gap between the double posts should be measured in long amas. Two teams with 3 oxen each passing each other in the opposite direction have a total of the length of 10 amas, and if each team consists of 4 oxen, the total width is 13 and a third long amas. An exact amma is 24 finger breadths long, while the long amma is 1/2 a finger breadth longer. This is the difference about 2%. If the two teams would be measured when moving in the same direction, their combined width would be 10 exact amas, according to Meir, or 13 and 1/3 exact amas, according to Yehuda. However, since they are measured when they're moving in the opposite direction, their combined width is 10 or 13 and 1/3 long amas, so it's more of a generous shear, not so restricted. Okay. Mishnah Beis. Mutu lahakar labe'er. It's permitted to place the double posts close to the well, making the enclosed area smaller. Provided that there's enough space remaining for a cow to stand with its head and most of the body inside the area to drink. The head and most of the body of a cow, the Gemara says, is 2 amas long. The Chachamim based the measurement on a cow because a cow is an animal of average size. However, the same minimum distance applies regardless of whether one's drawing water for smaller animals such as a goat or a sheep, or even a larger animal such as a camel. If the space is any smaller, at least half of the cow will be outside the enclosed area, which makes it more likely for the person taking the water to the animal to transfer the water from a Rishus HaYachid into a Rishus HaRabban. Mutar laharchik kol shehu. It's mutar to distance the double posts from the well by any amount, making the enclosed area as large as one wants. Uvivad sheyarba bepasan, provided that he adds enough boards between them so that no gap is wider than the maximum shear allowed, as we mentioned before, which would be 10 amas according to Meir and 13 and a third amas according to Rabbi Yehuda. Mishnah Gimel. Rabbi Yehuda says, Ad Beis Hasayim. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with the previous Mishnah's psak. The one may place the pasim as far as he wants from the well. Rabbi Yehuda says, Ad Beis Hasayim. It's permitted to enlarge the area only until it reaches the size of 2 beis sah, which would be 50 by 100 amas. A beis sah is an area which 1 sah of grain seeds is planted. It measures 50 by 50 amas. So 2 beis sah, or 50 by 100 amas, or 5,000 square amas, which is a pretty large area. Rabbi Yehuda's psak is based on a accepted rabbinical halacha, and in some cases carrying is forbidden even in an enclosed area, which would be Rishus HaYachid if it's larger than 2 beis sah. According to Rabbi Yehuda, this issur includes the area around the well that's enclosed by the minimal mechitzis of the pasan and the boards. The Chacham, however, disagree. They did not say that there's a maximum limit of 2 beis sah except in regard to a garden or a karfef, which is a large fenced area outside the town that's used for purposes such as storing wood, which are non-residential areas. People do not live or conduct regular living activities in these places. So according to the Torah, any closed-in area, no matter how big, is Rishus HaYachid, we're carrying is mutter. The Chachamim, however, were afraid that a large non-residential area might be confused with Rishus HaRabban. For this reason, they asked carrying in an enclosed area which is non-residential, that's larger than 2 beis sah. They gave such an area the status of a carmelis, which would be asur midrabanan to carry, but not asur midaraisa. Avlam hoya dir a sachar, or I think some have the gears a sahar, Yeah, the Rav says is the Garsi Sahar, which would be a Beis Hasurim, a jail, a Muksa, a Chotzer. But if it was a pen, a deer is a pen, like a kind of Tzayin deer. A pen discussed here is a section of land surrounded by temporary fences. Animals are kept in it so that they will fertilize the ground with their manure. Once they fertilize one area, the pen is then moved to the other. Oy Sachar. Sachar is an enclosure for animals that's inside a town. These two areas, the pen and the Sachar, the deer and the Sachar, are considered places where people live because shepherds say they're constantly to tend to the animals. Or a muksa or a chotzer, or a backyard or a courtyard, which are considered residential because people use them frequently for their everyday living activities. The yards behind the houses are used to store everyday items, while the yards in front of the houses, courtyards, are used for many daily activities. Afilu beis chameshes karen, afilu beis esek karen mutter. The Chacham hold that even if they enclose the area as 5 base kur, 150 base sa, or even 10 base kur, 300 base sa, carrying within it is mutter. Meaning that there's no upper limit. Since these areas are used for activities of everyday living, people will not confuse them with the Rosh Hashanah, which is not used for these activities. The area around the well is also residential because the people enter to draw water. Therefore, it's permitted to place a post far from the well as far as you want, making the enclosed area larger by any amount, provided that one adds enough boards between them so that no gap exceeds the maximum shear of a pirza. As we mentioned in Mishnah Aleph. According to Yehuda, however, one may not carry even in a completely residential area, such as a courtyard, that's larger than 2 beis unless it's surrounded by regular closed partitions. The area around the well is surrounded not by regular partitions, but by isolated double posts on boards, by the Diyumdin and the Pasan, which form partitions that are more open than closed. They have parts of Meruba Alo, in his view, therefore, it may not be larger than 2 beis. Mishnah Dalet. Weiter, Rabbi Yehuda says, if a public road cuts between the posts, the mechitzas formed by them are not good, and carrying in this enclosed area would be usher. Normally, each side of the well's enclosure is considered one long mechitza, despite any gaps in it, as long as no gap is wider than 10 or 13 amas. But if the public travels freely through it, cannot be viewed as such. Therefore, one should divert the road to the sides of the enclosed area so that it doesn't disqualify the mechitzas. The Chachamim say one does not need to divert the road because it does not render the partitions no good. And why is that? Al-Khar is interesting. Because they obviously they don't see that it's going to be Mavatal the Mechitza. The Chacham permitted carrying in an area enclosed by small mechitzas, whether diyumdin or pasan, only to allow those that are being oil regel to draw water for their animals. For this reason, such mechitzas are good only as long as the well or the other water source that they enclose provides water. If the water dries up, the mechitzas cease to be valid, and carrying in the area becomes usher again. The Chachamim were concerned that in some cases the water might dry up, and if people continue carrying there, because at the beginning of Shabbos they could carry there, or last time they came, let's say Pesach, they were able to carry there, but now they're being either regular for Shavuos, now they can't. So to prevent this from happening, the Chachamim limited the use of these mechitzas. Whether the water source is a public water hole, which is a pit where rainwater collects, or a public well, wells were fed by underground sources of flowing water, while water holes are merely pits in the ground which rainwater collects. A water hole is more likely to dry up than a well. Or a private well, a be'er hayochid, one may make these minimal mechitzas of pasan or diyuvda to draw water from them. However, to draw water from a private water hole, one must make a regular mechitza that's 10 tvachim high. These minimal mechitzas do not suffice to enclose a private water hole because there's two chesroinus. Number one, a water hole is more likely to dry up than a well, and number two, since it's a private hole, which is used only by a few people, then if it does dry up, there will not be enough people present to remind one another not to carry. We have a rule, though, that b'nei chabura are zrizim, but I guess we don't have enough people to be in this chabura, to be mazaris each other, to remind each other that we shouldn't do that. But if the source of the water, whether it's a hole or a well, is public, it doesn't matter if the water runs dry. Since it's used by a relatively large amount of people, they'll remind each other that carrying is no longer mutter, and there's no concern in the case of a well, even if it's private, because the well is unlikely to run dry in the first place. I guess these water holes, these bayres, would dry up pretty quickly. The Chachamim were geyser, therefore, that to be matter carrying around a private water hole, it must use regular closed mechitzas which are valid, even if the water dries up to Rebbe Kiva. Says like Rebbe Kiva. Rebbe Yehuda ben Bava Aimer. Rebbe Yehuda ben Bava says, "Ein oisen pasen elo lebe'er harabim bilvad." This whole heter of pasen is only for a public well, which has two advantages. A well rarely dries up, and even if it does, the relatively large number of people present will remind one another not to carry. But for all other sources of water, private wells, public or private water holes, you must make a belt, a regular closed machitza around the area that's 10 tvachim high. Rabbi Yehuda Baba calls it a chagura to teach us that it must surround the water source on all sides, just as a belt completely surrounds the person who wears it. Mishnah Hey. V'oidam Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava. Hagina ba'karvei fen shivim amma v'shirayim al shivim amma v'shirayim. Okay, what are we talking about over here? Additionally, Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava said, meaning in addition to the chumrah, he taught us at the end of the previous Mishnah, where the yumdin are effective only for a be'er harabim. Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava teaches another chumrah here. Hagina ba'karvei fen shivim amma v'shirayim al shivim amma v'shirayim. In Mishnah Gimel, the Chacham said a chiluk between a gina and a karfev to a chatzar. The difference between a non-residential area to a residential area. So even a non-residential area, even if it's enclosed by complete mechitzas, is also to carry in it if it measures more than 2 beisah. But carrying in a residential area is mutter no matter how big it is. The Mishnah brings Tanoim who are more machman than this. So hagina v'karfev shivim amma v'shirayim al shivim amma v'shirayim. In the case of a garden or a karfef that's 70 amas and a little bit, by 70 amas and a little bit, which is about 2 beisah, mukefes gezer gavaya asar tvachim, if it's surrounded by a fence 10 tvachim high, mataltlim b'seichel b'vad sheyeheba shemeira or bezdira or shetehesmucha le'ir. 2 beisah equal 5,000 square amas. The area of a square whose sides are 70 and a little bit amas long is slightly less than 4,994 square amas. So you may carry in it only if there's a watchman's booth. This is a hut in which a person lives day and night while tending to animals or guarding the field, or a dwelling inside of it, or beis dira. This refers to a dwelling which the owner of the garden or karfef would stay once in a while. It's like a small bungalow, I guess, in the field. Or it's near the town, that it's within 2,000 amas of the tchum. Since the owner can go whenever he likes, even on Shabbos, and traveling more than 2,000 amas from one residence is also, it's still considered a residential area. In which case, it's still used for residential purposes. So according to this Tana, the size limit of 2 beisah applies to residential area, that is, carrying even in a fully enclosed residential area is usher if it measures more than 2 beisah. As for an enclosed non-residential area, carrying it is always forbidden, no matter how small it is. Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava disagrees with the Chacham and Mishnah Gimel on 2 points. Number 1, residential area. While the Chachamim are mati carrying any enclosed residential area, regardless of the size, Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava requires it to be smaller than 2 beisah. And number 2, when we're dealing with a non-residential area, while the Chachamim were mati carrying in an enclosed non-residential area, it does not exceed 2 beisah. Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava asks carrying it no matter how small it is. According to Tosfos, Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava insists that the enclosed area may not be larger than 70 by 70 amas, 70 in a mashroom, 70 in a mashroom, only in situations he describes a garden and a karfef, which are essentially non-residential but serve some minor residential purposes. However, if the area is truly residential, carrying in it is mutter, no matter how large it is. An example would be the courtyard in front of a house, which is used by many people on a daily basis. He wouldn't say that that's a problem. The problem is only when it's like used somewhat for a residential area. Like if a person has a karfef and he would occasionally take a nap in there, so that's where Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava's chaylik. Rabbi Yehuda Aimer, even if the garden of the karfef has a pit, a ditch, or a me'ara, which is a pit is round, a shiach is a ditch, it's long and narrow, and a me'ara is square and covered, and has an opening on its cover. So all these things, a bar shiach and a me'ara that you're using for rainwater to be held in, is considered residential, and you may carry in it. According to Rabbi Yehuda, an area that is residential, even if there's no dwelling in it, such as a dira or a shemeira, and even if it's not in the town, but merely contains a water hole from which people drink from it. Rabbi Kiva says, even if a garden or a karfif does not contain any of these things, and thus is not residential at all, you still can carry it. Provided that it's not more than 70 amos and a fraction by 70 amos and a fraction. According to Rabbi Kiva, it's a non-residential area, such as a garden or a karfif that's subject to a size limit. Carrying in a residential area, by contrast, is permitted no matter how big it is, just like the Chachamim held in Mishnah Gimel. However, Rabbi Kiva has one chiluk. Rabbi Kiva holds that a non-residential area enclosed may not be larger than 70 by 70 amos, which is slightly less than the 5,000 square amos of the Beis Sayim that the Chachamim mentioned over there. Rabbi Lezer Omer, another shita, Rabbi Lezer says, if its length is more than its width, even one amma, you may not carry in it, meaning if it's not perfectly square. Carrying in a non-residential area of this size is usher unless it is square. However, it's necessary only that the length be within one amma of the width. A smaller difference doesn't matter, meaning if it's less than an amma, it doesn't matter. As long as it's not more than an amma, then it's a problem, according to Rabbi Lezer. Rabbi Yossi says, even if it's a rectangle with its length twice as long as its width, you may carry in it. That is, even if it's as long as 100 amos and narrow as 50 amos, carrying there is mutter, but its length may not be more than twice its width, over 100 amos. Now, what's the svaras over here? It looks like it's complicated. Mr. Shem, when we get to Gemara Erevin, we'll discuss it more. Okay, so let's just do a quick recap of who we have in the Mishnah. We have Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava that says that it has a residential. Then you have Rabbi Yehuda that says afilu ein ba'el bar sheichum or you could carry in it. Rabbi Kiva says afilu ein ba any of these things, but as long as it's 70 and a little bit by 70 and a little bit. Then you have Rabbi Lezer that it has to be square, and Rabbi Yossi says even if it's rectangle, it's not a problem. Mishnah Vav Rabbi Loi. Rabbi Loi said, Shamati Rabbi Lezer, I heard from Rabbi Lezer that it's mutter to carry in an enclosed garden or a karfif, afilu hiki beis kor, even if it's as large as a beis kor, which is 30 beis sa. A beis kor is 75,000 square amos, is 15 times larger than the 2 beis sa of 5,000 square amos. This is the fourth shita regarding the size of an enclosed non-residential area, in which carrying is mutter. These are the four shitas in the order of the chumras. Rabbi Loi, number one, holds in the name of Rabbi Lezer that carrying is mutter as long as it's not larger than a beis kor. The Chachamim in Mishnah Gimel say that it may not be more than 2 beis sa. Rabbi Kiva in Mishnah Hay holds that the maximum is 70 by 70. Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava and Rabbi Yehuda say that it has to be a residential. A non-residential, any size is going to be asur. So once we mentioned one halacha about Rabbi Loi in the name of Rabbi Lezer, the Mishnah is going to bring two more halachas seemingly unrelated to Hilchas Erevin Bechlal. The first is going to be about Erev Chatzeros, which is if several houses open into common courtyards, asur on Shabbos to carry from one chatzer into any of the houses, for any of the houses into the chatzer, unless the owners of all the houses join together to make a Erev Chatzeros. All the homeowners must participate in the Erev. If one of them fails to do so, it's not effective. Erev means it, like the lashon of Kol Yisrael Arevim, everyone joins together. But if somebody's missing, this is going to be a discussion later on in the Masechta, if somebody doesn't shtel to the Erev, it's not effective. However, this problem can be solved to some extent if that person says, even on Shabbos, that he gives up his right to use his chatzar. It then becomes mutter for anyone to carry in and out of the other houses. Rabbi Loi says in the name of Rabbi Lezer how the house of that person should be treated. I also heard from him that if the members of a courtyard made an Erev and one of them forgot to join the Erev, but he abandoned his rights to the chatzar, it's still forbidden for him to carry in and out of his house. Mutter, but it's mutter for them to carry in and out of the house. Rabbi Loi teaches here in the name of Rabbi Lezer that when the non-participant gives up his right to use the chatzar, he also gave up his right to his own house. Although he didn't say so explicitly, this is understood to be his kavanah, since his purpose in giving up his rights to the chatzar is to allow the other people from the chatzar to carry. He presumably wants to enable them to carry in as large as an area as possible. In this way, all his rights are given up to the homeowners, and he's merely their guest. They are then allowed to carry even in and out of his house, while the entire chatzar with all its houses, including his, is now owned by the same group of people, namely all the homeowners except for his. He may even carry in and out of their houses as the guest of the joint owner. There is one problem, however: if he carries between the chutzner and his own house, he automatically reasserts his ownership of the chutzner, and then it would end up being mevatel this eruv for everyone else, because he presumably intends to use his own property as the rightful owner, not merely as a guest. His previous surrender of his rights to the courtyard is now retracted, and the eruv becomes ineffective once again. So to prevent this from happening, he's forbidden to carry in and out of his house. So again, but another halacha I heard from him, the third halacha, that you can fulfill the chiyuv of eating maror on Pesach with the akravanim, which is a bitter vegetable whose leaves are shaped like scorpions. According to halacha, akravanim are not maror. I want to eat this plant on Leil Pesach is not yotze his chiyuv of maror. The Rav says, he heard that it's one of the part of the bark that grows around the palm tree. When I went around all the Rebbe Elazar's Talmidim, and I searched for somebody else who also heard of these three halachas, I did not find anybody who heard of them. Okay, Ad Kan, Parag Beis of Círovín.